invited me to speak because he was there when I was in the Boston Temple in the early days, early days. And I told him I have to speak to you after I return from India because so I get a little. I'm going to here for part of these discussions, and then I'm going to do the 23 skidoo and take some time to prepare for going to Badrinath. You ever been to Badrinath? You ever been?
No.
No? I have never been either. It's a once in a lifetime. But I'm going with somebody that's been there. Bhakti Chaitanya Swami.
Good company.
Can't do better than that.
Good company.
That's a little sharing because we don't have a lot of people here right now. He's wonderful Vaishnava. He loves Vrindavan deeply, deeply. We conducted together several visits to Vrindavan yatras and groups of devotees and so on. And he said to me one day, once in your lifetime you have to go to Badrinath. And I said, okay, because you're telling me I've got to do it. But when I go, can you come with me? He said, of course. His health is a wreck, without the details, but he's coming, and I'm really looking forward to being with him as well as once in a lifetime visit to Badrinath. So I'm going to disappear after a little while and start preparing for a place I've never been to, and et cetera, et cetera. The places we're going to visit, the whole schedule is all set up, and I just have to fill in that space along with Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj. So pardon me when I disappear, that's where I'm going. So along with Giriraj Maharaj compiling this information, I have a request. I have 4 requests. The first one is someone or a little team make it their project to take the recordings of what's being spoken, gather the information, interview additional people, and make a project of putting in a digital form, if not a published form, the history of the St. Louis Temple from the early days. Because it's going to be lost after some time. 10 little Indians, 9 little Indians, 8 little Indians, and who's left? We have some left. Chuck, are you going to live forever?
What?
Are you going to live forever?
Are you going to live forever?
The soul will live forever, but the body is going to kaput, right? But he's got a lot of information, so before he goes kaput, there should be, in addition to what's being said here, recordings and someone, I don't need an answer right now, but someone think about it, and maybe, our leadership here can identify some person or persons or team that can take that project on. Record, and digital is fine, doesn't have to be. Yesterday, I attended a program at Carbondale, and the building that we held the event was in a library, but there were no books. Because it's all digital. I mean, there may have been books, but I searched, I asked, and the answer I got is, today everything's digital. Which is okay, you can preserve digital too. So that's my request. Request number 1. And request number 2 is, are you going to be a speaker shortly after me? Do you know the history of how this started? Because I don't.
My time frame will be this prior to starting the temple.
Okay, great.
Until the completion.
Okay.
That'll be the
Okay.
2 to 3 year period.
Okay. So I'd like to hear that. So maybe you can be asked to I don't know what the sequence is, but if he can speak now. Okay, great. I want to hear that. My understanding is one of the main purposes of what we're doing is a kind of, the good old days. How it all came together, and I wasn't around when it my sense of the temple before I got here is very limited. The scope is very limited. And my sense of this temple is right, literally, if you wanted to put a pin on a big city that's in the middle of the United States, it's St. Louis. And from the get-go, my understanding is the St. Louis temple was a place for devotees to gather and go locally and countrywide. There was a base of the Radha Damodar party and the base of book distribution party and airport distribution party and a base to send people out and meet people. And in the missionary spirit that Prabhupada infused in all of us, without exception, from the very beginning, missionary spirit. I'll just share something from Boston because that's where I started. And from the day that I got there, the missionary spirit, and we got swept up in the missionary spirit. Except for the first month, I had to wash pots because Krishna knew I was proud, and Krishna wanted me to become free from pride. It was a project. It took all month. It's like chip a big chunk out of that. And then I got to go out like everybody else did from the get-go. And the get-go was pretty simple. Probably here also. You can share. Harinam every day. And the book distribution was very limited because the main thing that there was Back to Godhead magazine and invitation cards. So that's a nice beginning. And then from that came, continuation of what at least my distant impression is it became a base for the Radha Damodar party. There's lots of stuff in between, I'm sure, but that's my impression of the St. Louis Temple, a base for sending our armies out to meet the public and give and expand the Hare Krishna movement. And the places that were purchased were commonly urban, not necessarily, in the prettiest neighborhood because we didn't have wealth. One of the first temples, the Boston temple, it was rented because they didn't have money, they could pay the rent. And the income to pay the rent was back to Godhead magazine distribution, and there wasn't the Indian community that had wealth and they helped maintain us. We just seat of the pants kind of. So maybe there was some of that here in St. Louis, but vibrant place. So I'm going to make a second request. This because part of it is the past, then there's the present, and then there's the future. So this is present and future request. Chakri and Divyananda have maintained that spirit, despite their bodies and aging and everything. At the same time, the missionary spirit, has undergone some transformation, some shifting. And give life to our temple. the second request. Thoughtful, forward-thinking devotees, please, request, develop strategies, plural, of how to reach the hearts and the minds of those persons that the non-resident Indian population, the indigenous American population. It's not neglect, but focus and revive and in a purposeful manner. Make strategies and develop them and stay with them, because starting something is one thing and staying with something is another thing. This temple's been here for a long time, and it is passed through. I forgot Mukunlo. I forgot his tenure, but I know others after his tenure. And it takes a lot to maintain something in a purposeful, directed way. Prabhupada had power, Shakti, and that Shakti was passed on to us, his followers. We loved it. Whatever the problems were was no problem, because Prabhupada was empowering us to do mission impossible things again and again and again and again and again. Like buying a temple when you don't have any money, maintaining it when you don't have any means to maintain it, and mission impossible things. But the Spirit made it possible. I'm going to share something that's off topic but on topic in another sense. Something was just circulated. It's one of those, it's been circulated so many times that you can only forward it to one person at a time. And the one person at a time message was Ragatmika, who was married, yet she was a book distributor, because before that she was with the ISKCON Press as a composer. She means take the transcribed texts and put it in a written form, in a digital form. But she became a book distributor at the Freeport Temple. That's how I know her. Then the Henry Street Temple, and then the Brooklyn Temple. So she just read her Vyasa Puja offering, just 3-minute recording, and she is reading a letter from someone who is a devotee in Russia that tells the story that on September 17th, 1965, September 17th, 1965, a few years ago, a devotee who had a father who was with the Soviet military, and there was a Cold War going. The letter goes like this. There was the Cold War going on at the time, and the Soviet government had decided to send a number of ballistic missiles targeted at certain destinations in the USA. And the evening of September 17th, 1965 was the 99.9%, according to the father of this devotee, the day that they were going to press the red buttons. Each missile had its own red button. And they were countdown. The devotee said, his father said, I got gray hairs that night. And then suddenly a signal came. That the launch of ballistic missiles was terminated. September 17th, 1965. Some time passed. His son met devotees. His son became a devotee. His son got a copy in Russian of Lilamrita, gave a copy to his father. His father read Lilamrita and then told his son, do you know what? Your spiritual master placed his feet in America on September 17th, 1965. And that was the same day that this international war was terminated. Instead of missiles going to the USA to start an international war, your spiritual master landed, put his foot on the ground in America. And, who can say, is there a one-to-one correlation between the two events? Who can say? His father is convinced that was it, because everything else was lined up for launch the war and blow up who knows how many destinations. And that same potency that Prabhupada had, of course, in his own way, but the potency was passed on to followers. And that's what we did. We wanted to assist him without the details. That's what we did. Did we make mistakes? We made mistakes. We were less than refined. We were definitely less than refined. But the missionary spirit carried us forward, and the Hare Krishna explosion happened. So my second request is that persons who are thoughtful and enthusiastic and forward-thinking consider, not to neglect the whatever the percentage of the non-resident Indian population that comes to our temples, plural, all over the USA, at least, a strategy that reaches the hearts and the minds of the persons who Prabhupada came to give Krishna Bhakti to. And stay with it. It doesn't happen easily or quickly. It's a strategy, and work the strategy, and refine the strategy, and move it. That's going forward. There's St. Louis going forward in time. So now let's go back in time. And my involvement in St. Louis happened largely as a result of, a series of events. But one of those events was I had a deep sense of gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for finding me in a dark place at a university, and my life changed without all the nice autobiography story. And I felt a profound sense of gratitude, and I wanted to give back gratitude. And I still feel it. So one of the married couple, Prithu Shrava and Donna Kelly, were very inclined to college preaching and distributing books at colleges. That was their dedication. And I knew that. I knew Prithu from the book distribution days. Now he's married, and Donna Kelly is, a very special devotee too. And they have their different natures, but very dedicated to. So I went to Chicago to spend time with him and his wife, visiting colleges. And then, it was such a nice experience. Started visiting there regularly, and that became part of my service, working in Chicago, and then that tied into Chicago came St. Louis. So I started visiting St. Louis in that capacity. And when I came, I honestly don't remember who was the president. I certainly remember Bhima and Jalatala, who you already, if you haven't already met them, you had their recorded introduction to this gathering. Many of you in the room are smiling because you do know him and her. And, my impression of the time spent when I started coming here was he was the rock. He was the ballast, the foundation. Go ahead. And among other things, he was, those of you that know Bhima, you know what I'm about to say, but he was a very strong person, gentle, but very strong, and very devoted to the deities. And his wife also, very devoted to the deities, the offerings, all the deity standards. The deities are not big deities, by size of, dimension. But that didn't diminish his devotion. Very, very, very dedicated and very concerned about the pujaris and the standard of deity worship and maintaining it and the cooking. And Jalatala was right there with him. And of course, the mission and all the things that are involved in, minimizing mistakes and doing things right. That was Bhima was the ballast. He was the rock. And then, circumstances happened with him, and he went off to India. So then, the guard changed, and others became leadership without all that history. At some point, I can't remember the details. My memory is very poor. But Rupa Sanatan became a president, and Rupa Sanatan was Rupa Sanatan. Did you ever meet him, Rupa Sanatan? Young man, American fellow.
Where is he from?
He,
What temple?
this temple, he was the president of this temple for some years.
That was
Brahmachari.
Gitanagari.
Oh, yeah, Gitanagari. Okay, okay. Another time, Gitanagari Kata. Okay. And, as each of us have a personality, he had his personality, but similarly, trained to a degree, trained by Bhima, he maintained deity worship standards very carefully. He didn't have that expertise that Bhima and Jalatala had, but he inherited what they gave him, and has some skills, affective skills. He made mistakes, like all of us make mistakes. Lal Gopal reminded me of one time that I don't remember, where I became angry with him. I don't even remember what it was. I remember the circumstance. But he was a very gentle person, intense in his own way, but gentle by his nature, and caring. And the preaching, especially Chakri and Divyananda, the preaching went on. Largely at the airport. That's my memory. And in other ways, the spirit of reaching out kind of diminished. Speaking in a broad sense, the Indian community were regular supporters and visitors, and taking part in festivals and coming to the Sunday program. Although largely, as is today, they live in the suburbs, but this is their place of worship, and so they came to their place of worship and began offering a kind of support that wasn't there in the very beginning, financial support and other ways of helping to maintain the devotees and the temple and everything and everything. And one of the services that I recall doing, I'm looking at the clock, I'm supposed to end at 10:45. I don't know if I'm going to go that long. Part because my memory is so bad. Honestly. Something about aging and memory. They don't go well together. At least for me.
Not just you.
Huh?
Not just you.
That's why it's good to have some recording and memory stirring. Do you remember what about this? And those kind. I'm sure Giriraj Maharaj is going to do that kind of interviewing because he knows how to do it. So I became interested as like going to Chicago to begin with. I became interested in the university outreach. So this is like a third request. And I spoke with, because the person who picked me up at the airport was Bhupal. And how's it going at the university? And he indicated it wasn't what it used to be. The the attendance for this reason, that reason, the other reason isn't what it used to be. So persons that have, I asked him, is there somebody that can visit the university on a regular basis or periodic basis and meet students, distribute books, meet students, make friends, distribute prasadam, invite them to the club, because there is a club, there's a recognized club, and he oversees it, but it's dwindled. I'm stirring the pot of, I'm not Prabhupada, but stirring the pot of following as an agent or instrument of some kind to our founder Acharya. Let us, Wash University and SLU are special places. This is so close to St. Louis University. And those who are forward-thinking individuals, in addition to maintaining, think of how to expand. And, to put a little fire under the seat of your pants. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. As you probably know, it's not like intimidation, it's just reality. There's proliferation of different, splinter groups or renegades or this is and that's that are not affiliated with Prabhupada, but they like to bear the name, the Hare Krishna movement, or Srila Prabhupada followers, and they want to trademark that, and it's, it happens in religion, and it's going to happen in America. It is happening in America. And if it isn't already happening in St. Louis, wait a while, it's going to happen in St. Louis. Without further details, there are, in some prominent universities in America, there are, aside from the Hare Krishna movement, the ISKCON Temple Club, there's a this group and there's a that group that also have a club at the universities. Wait a while. If it's not happened already, it's going to happen because it's just nature takes its course. So please, at these two places that are important, gems or jewels in ISKCON, in the St. Louis city, develop it. And don't just leave it up to one person to develop it, like, Wash U. He needs some help. Help him. Whatever way you can. You don't have to be God's gift to outreach preaching, but do something. It's quite simple. Invitation, prasadam, and, friendship. And some literature. That's our Hare Krishna movement. So that's the third request. Rupa Sanatan passed away, and so the torchbearer then became Lal Gopal, right? Huh? Okay. And how long did that last for?
8 years.
8 years?
Six years. 6 years. From 2012 to 2023.
You have a good memory. Wait till you get older.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's already been.
Okay. 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 The temple has been maintained. I mean, this is an old building. And probably like bodies that get old, different parts of the bodies have to be replaced. This replacement, that replacement. This, this temple has been maintained reasonably well. And that was one of the things that Rupa Sanatan was good at, maintenance. He was often engaged in just repairing and rebuilding and maintaining. He was good. So you're all here participating in ISKCON St. Louis, and congratulations, and thank you. And those of us that are a little older, I had a full medical checkup. I'm past the age of 75. So the doctor said, you got the last quarter. Live to be 100. Chuck, are you ready? So the body parts change, and the next generation has a legacy to carry forward. And looking at the past, to see the glory of the past and enjoying the achievements and the accomplishments and the contributions of this one, that one, carry it forward. The legacy of our founder Acharya. And the principle is simple. It's back to basics. Not only back to basics, uphold the basics and stay with them. Harinam Prasadam distribution, book distribution. One of the things that helped maintain this temple that I'm aware of, I don't know the numbers, at least presently, but the restaurant was a very important part of the financial maintenance of the temple. So that's nice. But more than nice. That's part of the mission of the Hare Krishna movement. When I was in Alachua recently, one lady introduced herself. She said, I met Prabhupada. She didn't tell me. I used to run a beauty salon in Dallas. And Prabhupada walked past the beauty salon that I operated. He was part of his walk. And one day I went out to greet him. Are you a monk? And he said, the first exchange with this lady, said, you appear to be a well-to-do lady. Can you build me a Govinda's a vegetarian restaurant? First time they met. Prabhupada was bold. And she said, sure. And she did. Apparently, I didn't ask any of the details. She didn't volunteer either. But she was like really happy to have that special exchange with Prabhupada. And his encouragement empowered her to do what she did. I don't know the details. She didn't give me, I didn't probe. So prasadam distribution is a very important, fundamental feature that Prabhupada wanted, and maintains us, but not just for financial, it's giving Krishna consciousness. That was Prabhupada's concern, very clearly. And so the final request. This is, as you all know, this is the previous month was the month of Shravan. When Balaram appeared, was the Purnima of that month of Shravana Purnima. And the day after he departed starts the next phase of the moon, the month of Bhadra. And in this month of Bhadra comes Bhadra Purnima. So I would like to, this is a request, I would like the thoughtful, forward-thinking devotees that want to revive the spirit of the Hare Krishna movement, consider what would be, it's just not too many days, like 17 days remaining between now and Bhadra Purnima. What's a reasonable number that you can strive for to have sets of Srimad Bhagavatam placed in people's homes? Those of you that have an interest like that, get together, figure out a realistic number, and go for it. For example, and I'm going to end. For example, just yesterday, because of the circumstance of the schedule, last minute I was invited Friday evening to the local Hindu temple in Carbondale. It's a little place. And so I decided, let me tell them about Srimad Bhagavatam. And so that's what we did. And at the end, one committed person wants a set of Srimad Bhagavatam, just because I was thinking about it and stirring the pot. And 3 people in the audience say they already have the Bhagavatam set, but they haven't read it. So then Rupa Vilas is going to make a plan to have them start a reading group. Maybe he'll lead the reading group and then read the Bhagavatam, not just get it, but read it. My guess is once that starts, if not before, some other people are going to want a set of Srimad Bhagavatam. And you have to, when there's a desire and then there's an action plan, unexpected things can happen. You never know. You never know. I didn't think going to the Hindu temple in Carbondale, people would say, yes, I want a Bhagavatam set. Surprise. And that's how the Hare Krishna movement expands. From our founder Acharya to us to others. That's the disciplic succession method, and become an empowered member of this community and think how Shravan Purnima, the next, of course, Radhastami comes before, so you'll have a nice Radhastami festival. And you can think how at the Radhastami festival and other ways, increase the distribution of Prabhupada's books, because it's so foundational for the Hare Krishna movement. So that's the 4th request. And I went 5 minutes over my time, looking at the clock. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
I think it's okay. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want. Okay. There's an expression, it's not my first rodeo. Although that might be nice. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everyone, especially those that invited me and those that are here, for coming. I have quite a few notes here because, like Maharaj mentioned, dates and details have a way of escaping us. So in a situation like this, in which dates and timing are actually part of the reason why I'm here, because I'm the only witness left, I think it's important that I document it. And by way of documentation, I have a series of letters written by Srila Prabhupada, directed to me, concerning this temple. So these are actual factual dates. They may not be on the money. That might be a week here, a week there. And I apologize ahead of time if there's any discrepancies. But and I'd like to start. I have a recording. There's I'm not going to dwell on it, but there's some effort to where some of these memories will be written down in a book form, or at least a pamphlet form. And the title is going to be, Where Have You Been, Vamanadev? And I'll tell you why I chose that. Because I have right here, and I'll see if I can make this, I'm not the technological wizard. I'll set the scene. I was working outside of the LA temple, trying to hone my skills in carpentry. Prabhupada had started me out a year or two prior, noticing I had done some things But this was when I was still a brahmachari. It was 1968 in Los Angeles. And I had come late to an evening class. It was a Srimad Bhagavatam class. And as soon as I walked in the door, in the back room of the LA temple, this is what Prabhupada said.
Where you had been, bound there?
I'm working. I have a job.
Oh.
Making furniture, working with wood. I'm learning a lot so I can make nice clothes.
That's all right.
So that was,
Where have you been, Mom and Dad?
he said, "Where have you been, Vamandev?" And I said, "I've been working. I'm working in a shop, doing furniture, learning how to build and make, so I can make temples or things for Krishna." And he said, "That's all right." He smiled. That's all right. That's all right. So that I consider to be a stamp of approval.
And you can hear Srila Prabhupada's laughter also.
Yes, yes.
Admiring that.
Yes.
Appreciating it.
To the point that Prabhupada is a very, very, in those days and up to the present, we maintain a very close family feeling within our society. Prabhupada was very aware of his, especially when there was only a few of us, very aware of every disciple, to the point where I'm a low on the totem pole, not to use an inappropriate expression, but I was low in any managerial sense within ISKCON, but yet he wanted to know, why are you late for Bhagavatam class? This was at the end, during the questions. I just walked in, and he looked up. So, and another time, I was, some months later, I was in Hawaii, and I had lost track of the temple, because at that time I was working as a carpenter, and this is just a side note, I'll get back to the real purpose of being here. But part of the purpose of being here was to show the relationship Srila Prabhupada was instilling in us as a society, one of caring, one of loving, one of reciprocation, one of concern over one another. And it had been about 2 weeks since I had been to the temple. I was working as an apprentice carpenter at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and he was about to take lunch. I was in the kitchen chatting with his cooks, and he said, "Is that you, Vamandev?" And I said, "Oh, busted again." "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." So I walked over to his room, give my obeisances, and he said, "Where have you been?" So once again, he called me out, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, "That's all right." But just to segue now into a conversation that ensued immediately after that was one I had just received notice. This was in 1968 or early 69. I had received notice that I was drafted. This is the heat of the Vietnam War. And he gave, I had a plan. So I went to Prabhupada. I brought it up to Prabhupada then, you know, get the opportunity often to voice your plans like that to your spiritual master. But I said, "Prabhupada, my idea is that I go in, I join the forces so I can pick my service, and I'll go as a non-combatant builder. I'll go in there and be on the front lines building their little encampments." And he says, "No." He says, "You will be killed." He says, "You should not go. You're a Brahmin. You're too valuable to our society. Don't do it." He said, "I think somebody had already been approved, a conscientious objector, based on their involvement with our society." And he mentioned his name, and I don't want to say it because I might have the wrong name. But he said, we have used the philosophy to promote this position, our position on more, especially for our students initiated. At that point, I was only a single initiate. I only had Harinam initiation. So he said, "But fight it." So I went back east and got a lawyer, and my father lined up things for me. And I was granted a conscientious objector status. So that was a good thing. But now I had to work for 2 years. So I had to figure out how I was going to dovetail that and get through 2 years of serving. Part of the criteria was that you had to serve for 2 years away from your home, at least by, I think it was several hundred miles, and you had to do something that contributed to the health, education, and welfare of the society. So that meant, to me, the perfect place would be to work at a university. So I got a job at Columbus, the University of Columbus, Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. Pradyumna Prabhu was there, as well as several other devotees. And since I was going to be tied down for 2 years, and I was already in the position where I really should be married, a marriage was arranged between myself and Indira. Some of you may know her. She's old devotee, joined when she was 15 or 16 in New York, 26 Second Avenue, and that's where I first met her. But of course, there was no interaction in those days. You just arranged it. And Jadharani was the go-between. She just took one look at me. She was out in Hawaii. She said, "Vamadev, you got to get married." You know, because I had, bleach blonde hair and all this stuff, and it was kind of, I was working and I had a good steady income, so I was prime. So I got married and ended up in Columbus. I got my job at Ohio State University, which lasted less than a month, because as soon as we moved there, I had the job, and then we moved there. There's a little side note there too. The temple was here, is a temple, and then there was a garage with a dirt floor, and I leveled the dirt floor, and I put a rug down, and I put a sleeping and a thing, and I called it my barn ashram. So that's where when I got married in New York, we went to that. But that was very quickly called by the temple president that they did not want householders living together in the temple, even if it was a different building. They just didn't want that. It was agitation. So I said, okay. So that's when I got together with Pradyumna, with Harigriva, and several other devotees, and we tried to figure out where we can go as different individuals. We were starting temples. So there's a big push back in 1969 by this time. And there was a big push to start temples. And so I took one look at the map, and I saw there's nothing near St. Louis. But it's the gateway to the west. It was the arch had just been finished, and there's a lot of press about St. Louis, and I couldn't imagine why devotees hadn't chosen St. Louis yet. So in my youthful boldness, I decided I'm just going to put everything on my little VW $200 bug and just go to St. Louis and start a temple. So I have lots of notes here and stuff, but I'll just go until I get stumped with a date, because I'll just see if I forgot anything. Oh yes, I asked Srila Prabhupada about St. Louis in particular, and he said, I'm in due receipt. If you can open a center, that will be a great pleasure. I want all married couples, I'm just paraphrasing a little, to open new centers and carry on by dint of hard labor. Every householder, husband and wife, require an apartment, so if they've got an extra room, immediately they can start a center. So it's very simple. You have to have a place to stay, just figure it out. And then on November 16th, 1969, I got a letter, Dear Raman and Dave, please accept my blessings. I'm glad to receive your letter dated November 16th, 1969, and thank you very much for opening a branch at St. Louis so promptly. So that's when this temple, on or around November of 1969, not this temple building, but the movement had moved to St. Louis. So that's the first, and he actually says later here too, you have my blessings, let me see, to open the Krishna Conscious Center. And so there's 2 letters in which he gave his imprimatur to do that. So it wasn't a whimsical thing. There was some going on there. And then, so we drove. It was a harrowing beginning. We had everything in this little VW, and we drove to St. Louis. And on the way, getting off the freeway to get gas, a car came over and it came up of nowhere because it was over a thing, and we just pulled on, and a car was screeching, kind of bumped my bicycle, which was strapped to the back of the VW, and kind of mangled it. But he went off down into the curb, down into a little thing. He didn't hurt himself, but it's a good thing he veered away. St. Louis wouldn't have get started that time. So that was the first thing that happened. That was Maya trying to see how determined I was. So shakily we got back up on the road. They're all good. I couldn't do anything to help them, so they were not injured. And so I went on to St. Louis. Pulled into St. Louis after one day. We spent one night on the road and went on to St. Louis. And there was this very nice, we pulled into St. Louis, had no idea where we were, so we just went up and down Lindell Boulevard. That was the first place. We looked at the city map, and this was the dividing line. There was black-bodied people on the north, mostly in those days, and then there was this. But this was not only, it was just a really nice area. You had Forest Park, St. Louis University, and so I just said, this is where we're going to start. And so there was a hotel on Lindell Boulevard. I don't know if it's still there. I haven't even walked the grounds. Run by this nice Indian couple. We explained to them our mission. They gave us a nice apartment that had a kitchen facility, a cooking facility, which we asked for. And we rented it for a week. That was the first week we were in St. Louis. I went out to get a job, and I managed to get a job. So happily I came home from St. Louis University. I got a job, just the first place I asked. I got right in. I showed them my credentials. And I told them I had to work for 2 years, so they know, oh, this guy is going to be here for a while, and it looks like he can do the work, so we'll hire him. So I went back to the hotel with this good news that we had a place, and everybody in the hotel was on the street, and there were fire trucks everywhere. And I said, oh my God, this is ridiculous, what's going on? And then I looked and I found Indira. She was kind of cowering in the corner, and I said, what happened? She said, well, I was making lunch. I made a chaunch, and I kind of got out of control. The smoke set off all the alarms. There was no fire, but the smoke and the chaunch. In those days, we didn't really know that much about cooking, but we knew you had to really make a chaunch if you wanted to make dal. So I went to the owners of the hotel, and I apologized that we caused, massive difficulties for them, and they said, that's fine. Leave as soon as you can. So that made my second priority, to find a place to stay. I was having this problem on and off through my whole devotional career, getting kicked out. In fact, that's why I had to leave the university, Ohio State University. I got a job there, and then I started living in my barn ashram. I got evicted from my barn ashram, and that weekend before, I also led a Sankirtan party on what was it, the Ohio State University football. So there's 150,000 people crowded, and I made the front page of the student newspaper with this exotic-looking drum I had from Hawaii, and it says, Sankirtan Party, or Hare Krishna comes to Columbus, led by a maintenance worker from Ohio State University. I went up to the office on Monday morning because I had seen the paper, and he said, you know what this means? And I said, yeah, I'll see you later. So in those days, you couldn't fight it. You could have tried, but I didn't have any way of fighting it. So then within a week, I was off to St. Louis, looking at that point after the fire for a place to live, because I got kicked out of that place too. So I went and found this place, hotel, not a hotel, apartment building. I think someone said it was a 2-story. I remember it as a 3-story, right next to where 4544 Laclede is. I remember it as being 2 sets of apartments on top of each other, and behind, on this side, behind each apartment was a little efficiency, and they shared a bathroom. So what I got was the first floor, and it had a big picture window, and then the owner had the first floor of the other side, and then there was apartments behind us and apartments above us. So that's where the Hare Krishna Center was. It was there. And Indira, my wife at the time, she wrote Hare Krishna temple in the boldest and brightest letters you could make on this big picture window in the front of this building, and it looked like we owned the whole building. We're paying $90, including utilities, for 3 rooms. And picture these 2 mats here, the brown ones, and then the gray one. The gray one is the kitchen. That's where our bed was. That's the temple room. These 2, they had a large arch between them. This is where the temple was. That's all we had. And the bathroom was out the back door of the kitchen, and there was some bikers that lived in the back. And they didn't like us at all. And neither did the people above us, because every time we had a kirtan, all they took was brooms. Bang, 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 bang. And we just started, it was part of the movement, you know, so we just went along with it. So that went on for a while. But then there was and so by April, the temple was actually, let me see. So we got kicked out of there too.
April 1970, right?
Well, April 1970, a Post-Dispatch did a front page Sunday edition, recorded, and I have pictures of it somewhere. I can pass this around if you wanted to look at it, or I'll look at it later. It was the cult of Krishna, cult of chanters comes to St. Louis. And it was a front page. It was on the top fold. As you take a newspaper and fold it, it was on the top, and you saw cult of chanters and pictures of myself giving a class and Indira doing artik. And it was just like, whoa. And that was that. Then the whole thing went berserk. People started coming like crazy. And this was after only just a few weeks. April, let me see. Proposal was in, let me see, 11. So that was in 69. That's November. And the temple opened later that month, right away, later that month. And by January, February, March, April. By April, well, we got kicked out November, December, January, February. Around January, February, we got politely asked to leave because the whole front of the temple was full of shoes all the time. And of course, the biker didn't like it, and the owner didn't like it, and so we had a nice program. We were speaking of the basic things we did. Of course, I was working full time, so there wasn't the daily things. We had Monday, Wednesday, and Friday classes. Of course, every morning we had an early morning program, like normal. And after just a few weeks, we had a few brahmacharis that joined right away. And then but it wasn't long, within a few months, that we were evicted. But he didn't do it right away. It took him a while. So in the meantime, we had to find a place to stay. And so that's when 4544 Leclerc became available. Of course, here I am. I'm just new in town, been here 3 or 4 months. I'm getting evicted, and I didn't have any money. I mean, I was making like $150 a week as a maintenance carpenter, maybe 200. I'm not sure what it was, but after they took out all the stuff, it barely kept the lights on and kept prasadam. So there's a few things we had to do. First of all, if we were going to move, we had to have money, and if we were going to move, we had to have a plan. So the plan was to get a building. So I saw the for sale sign, and I had to go through a realtor because he already had his fingers in it, because it was a realtor sign. And we went up to the realtor, and we asked, what do they want for it? And they gave us a number. It was way beyond what we could afford. And I said, but by the way, I don't have any money, so I have enough for a down payment. I had like $400. But I have to, I want to know, and this is my offer. And I said, I want you to write up 3 offers for this building. Offer A, B, C. I'm going to buy this building. And the offer C was way out of my league. Offer B, I can maybe do it as long as I sold my firstborn or something. And the offer A was more reasonable. And I said, but I want you to submit these. Don't tell them about B and C. Just tell them A. And so I made up some, I'll just use some numbers. Say it was $3,000 down, and we're going to close within, from the first, within 60 days or something like that, with 30 days. I don't know what it was. So they accepted the first offer, but the cleave it in it was that they had to take back the loan, because I couldn't get a loan. I couldn't even apply or get guarantee on a credit card, what to speak of a loan for a house. So I asked them if they would take back the loan, because I'm a good guy, it's just hard working and all that. And they said yes. They carried the loan. And this was the second building. The only other one, according to my notes and my researcher, was the other one on Watsika. Watsika was bought only a month before, or 2 months before. So this was a very big thing. Prabhupada was very happy about this, and I'll read some of those, and I'll show you the letters.
Tell them that you bought it for $3,000?
No, I didn't tell him anything. He was very, I didn't want to, diminish the fact that I got a building, Look at, I got a 2.5-story brick building, and next to Forest Park, and 1 block off of Lindell Boulevard. Lindell Boulevard has these, big cathedrals and everything. Of course, we got a little dumpy house, but I played the big side. So, the positive side. So we got that building. We got the accepted offer, but I had about a month to figure out how I was going to pay for it. So I was scraping together. And, by that time, Dr. Joe came with his wife, Kathy, and some people might remember who these people are. Yes, Joe Kunkel. He was on the original, we started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness of St. Louis Incorporated, 501c3. We got somebody to write up the papers for us for next to nothing, because I had next to nothing. And, but I didn't buy it in their name. I bought it in my name. And Prabhupada asked about that later, and I said, well, I had to do it because I had to convince these people that I would be responsible for it. And they didn't know anything. Of course, nobody knew what the Hare Krishna were or anything. So it would have been hard to buy it in ISKCON's name, since we didn't even have the 501c3 status yet anyway, until about 2 or 3 months after we bought it. So anyway, I got the property agreement, but how am I going to come up with the money? So about 3 days or 4 days before, it was
3 days before the closing.
before the closing. I already had about 800 or 900. I was really going for it, And let me see. It was looks like it was in the spring of 1970, and the thaw had come. And there was ice on the road, and it all come. And I was walking out, pondering, how am I going to get money? And there was some sort of a wallet that had been sitting in the frozen ditch there, right in front of the temple. And I just kicked it. It looked like, I didn't know what it was, but it was real fat, and it had all kinds of 20s and 100s in it. But all the ID was washed out. It was just totally, you could barely tell the dollars, but the numbers were on the dollar bills. I mean, I went into the little rental place we had, and I laid out all the money, and by the time I scraped to get all the money, it was over $3,000. Wow. So that was the direct. Then I knew St. Louis they were going to get that building, because it was at least 2,000 or 3,000 that was in that bundle. So 3 days before the closing, yeah. But that's not the fun part. The reason I had all that time was that the guy that was kicking us out, and this is kind of, if there's young people here, close your ears, but he died of a heart attack. And there was nothing I did to do it, but he died, and so he couldn't collect the rent for 2 months. So I gained $180 because I didn't pay rent for 2 months. So that had added to it. So Krishna just, he got in the way, boom, just like you consider the odds of that are pretty slim. But I believe everything happens. Not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Supreme Lord. So it was meant to happen. So that gets you to the point of where the Laclede was bought. And so let's go on. We opened it. The Post-Dispatch article was a huge success. It was really the best. We couldn't have bought any kind of press coverage or anything. And when we first went to the temple, to the St. Louis, and saw the meaning of this arch, we felt that, well, we'll play off of this for our advertising. So we made up flyers, and it said, "Welcome to to ISKCON St. Louis, the gateway to Vaikuntha." So that was we made up thousands of those. We handed them out everywhere. And it kind of worked. I mean, you know, we're part of the establishment now, you know. So that was really good. What's that?
Haridwar, the gateway to Vaikuntha.
Well, yeah. Well, we could have, but we weren't that clever. We wanted to promote ISKCON St. Louis anyway. Yeah. Whatever happened, it worked out. So these are responses from Srila Prabhupada. These are different letters. Okay, so I don't want to jump that far ahead. Anyway, a lot of devotees were coming. There's 2 letters in here. Everyone knows that Srila Prabhupada never actually came to St. Louis physically, but I want to read you a couple times. I invited him several times, but circumstances were such that they didn't happen. So in November of 1970, let's see if I can find that. In November, he says, he says, the newspaper clipping is very encouraging. Prabhupada loved that newspaper clipping. He said, I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter of March 1970. The newspaper portion is very encouraging. They have devoted so much space for describing our activities. Although there are a few misquotations, never mind, it's good publicity. It's good publicity. So he says, you're setting good example of how Krishna-conscious grihastas can live for Krishna. You practically experience there's no difficulty in household or life if people are in Krishna consciousness. Stick to your principles and the program, which you are following already nicely, lecturing in universities, having classes in your apartment, distributing prasadam, all of them are very, very nice. So he goes on to say, we have, this is where he states, and this is January, February, I have to do this because they do it different. This is in April, that they have just bought a building in a church building here, and this was in Los Angeles. So gradually, your center one day will also have our own building. So this is before I had bought the building. This newspaper clipping came, and as a result, that's why all those shoes were in the front of the property. So shortly after that, Prabhupada said, I'm very pleased to learn you have several new devotees. Your temple has been completely renovated. So this was after we did some renovation. And he says, I beg to thank you for your kind invitation, and certainly I shall be very happy to stay for a while in St. Louis when I come back to the U.S. So that's one. And then next, this is in December of 1970. Thank you very much for your kind letter. I have noted its contents with great satisfaction. I'm very much willing to see your center in St. Louis, but for the time being, don't install Radha Krishna deities. I mean, we were kind of pushing the envelope a little bit there. So there's that. This is just to get no, not that one, this other one. Get the dates and everything correct. So then that was part of the, that was all the good things, the really good things, and that many of the good things had happened. Then there's several people started coming in those days, and it was going along quite nicely. And so in, let me see, in 1971, around August, the end of August, I decided to go to there was a need for me. I finished my work there, my work at the university and actually at Barnes Hospital. I was first kicked out of the St. Louis University because I showed up with a Zika, and they thought that I had gone mad. So I let it grow for a week, and I went to Barnes Hospital, and I got a job there in the carpentry division. And so when I finished that employment, the 2-year stint with the conscientious objector, about within 6 months, I made plans to hand over the realm, the reins of St. Louis to some other devotees, and I wanted to go on Sankirtan. I wanted to go, and so it was one of the first traveling buses. I had a VW bus with a child that was born in July of 1970. And this was only a few weeks after we moved in. And he was by the time we decided to go and leave St. Louis, it was a full year later, so he's about a year old. And where was I going with this? Oh, well, the naming of my son was, we moved into the temple 2 weeks before he was born. And of course, moving into the temple, it wasn't like moving into a house or something. It was a rooming house. It was owned by this elderly couple that made their retirement money by charging like $10 a week or $10 a day, I don't know. And each room had a sink in it. And there was about 4 or 5 rooms, and they lived upstairs, and they had the rooms. So we had to take out all that plumbing. We had to take out all the walls. The whole first floor we gutted. And I say we, me, myself, and I, and there's one or two, Joe Kunkel, and a couple others. I mean, when you see somebody doing that, you feel sorry for them, so they were joining to help me. So I had a good team going and doing that. And we got that done, and it was going along quite nicely. And so I decided, well, I'm a starter. I was there at New Vrindavan when there was only Kirtananda, Hari Griva, Pradyumna, and myself. Wow. So this was back in the day. I started that. I went to Hawaii. I took Govinda Dasi to visit her husband. And that was back when I was still a brahmachari. I just schlepped her stuff over to be with Gaurasundar. And the first night I was in Hawaii, I was told that there's no place to stay. There was no place to stay, so and Gaurasundar said, well, the beach is only 2 blocks in that direction. So all I had was a backpack. So I said, oh, that sounds like fun. Let me go down to the beach. So I went down to the beach. I found a high spot on the sand, and I set up my little altar. You know, you always had an altar. Even if you're a brahmachari, you had an altar. And I set it up, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, all my stuff was floating away. I was on a high, and I said, this is not the way it's supposed to end up, you know. So I had to go gather up all that stuff, so I just flashed back a little bit just to show you that there's a lot of interesting things that happen when you're a starter, and I was a starter. When I went to New Vrindavan back in, this had to be 68, the fall of 68, as I said, there was only 3 or 4 people there. Kirtananda had been having some trouble, and he was out of the movement for a while, but he had come back at that time. And so when I was with Brahmananda, I was a temple commander in New York, and so Brahmananda tapped me on I tapped him on the shoulder when I heard them saying that they're looking for some builders at this farm. They got some acreage out there in West Virginia. And I said, I'm going like this. I want to go. So he said, okay, you can go, but you have to come back. So I went there. I stayed there about a month and winterized a building for them. So I was there to help winterize that original farmhouse. Any of those that know that tar paper that's on the walls, I did all that. Yeah, the only one they had. I'm sure it's an icon. They must have taken my tar paper off the walls. Well, they asked me how I could make it winterized, and I said, well, you can get that tar paper that has it's like roofing. And I said, you can just nail that onto the clapboard. It'll keep the wind out if you want the cheapest. Otherwise, you have to remove this clapboard, or you have to, rebuild it. Then you have to insulate. But if you only, I said, how much money do you have? And they said, well, how much money do you have? I said, I gave all mine to I gave all mine to I gave mine to Brahmananda. I don't have anything. So they said, well, we better do it the cheap way. And I said, well, it works for me if it works for you. So I went and nailed all that around and got that going. And then it was getting kind of cold. It was like November. and I was walking down this trail to go to a little waterfall to take my shower, and you know, when ice started coming out, and I said, well, I think I better go back to New York. So, but you had to escape. You couldn't just ask to go back to New York, because I don't know if you know anything about New Vrindavan, but it's like the Hotel California. Once you're there, you can't get out, you know. So, you know, I had to figure out how to get out of there, you know. You know, it was a little bit too austere for me, you know. No heat, no water, you know, just basic things. Food was whatever was left over from their little place. They lived in the chicken coop. I had the religious house called the Holy House, because it had so many holes in it. So anyway, so I put all my few belongings in, and they had this huge Buick or something. It was like a floating living room or something on wheels. And so I kind of tucked it into the back of the trunk, and went to town under the ruse of getting some materials to finish the job, but it finished the job already. They didn't really pick up on that. So when I got to town, I grabbed my little sleeping bag in my backpack, and I said, see you later, I'm going back to New York. And he said, you can't go. And I said, watch me. And I just walked out and went to New York. And showed up, and Brahmananda took one look at me, and he said, go get shaved up and take a bath. You know, it's a little bit ripe. So I did that, and it was shortly after that I went to visit Prabhupada in Seattle. So anyway, that drove me to Hawaii. Hawaii drove me to the beach, and the beach drove me to. I know it. That's right. And my memoirs of those times is going to be like a ping pong ball, and you know, going like this, and because that's just begun. This is only the first year and a half of my service. I was in 2 different continents. I was in Hawaii as one end to the other, from New York to California to Seattle, Washington, and then over to Hawaii, and then I came back and I went to Columbus, and then I went to St. Louis, and I stayed there for all of 2.5 years. So that was a long time for me. That was a long time. But as soon as I got my walking papers, I had the desire to go preaching stuff. So I went, I started a temple. After trying to avoid getting snagged into another temple, I just went ended up in Oklahoma City. And while I was in Oklahoma City, with a nice sign, I was on a main street. I just found this little place. It was nice. It was right on a main street, and it said Hare Krishna Temple. I just made it out of wood, and I used a router and made it look nice, and it said Hare Krishna Temple. And I went out, and I was working. I was a foreman. Within days, I had a job. I was foreman over about 6 crews, and it was really a nice gig I had going there within just literally days. But I came back to lunch, and there was a Sankirtan party busted me, found where I was. They saw the Hare Krishna sign, and Indira was flying around trying to make chapatis and serve about a dozen people sitting in this small little living room that we had as a temple. And they said, this is where you've been, huh? We've been wondering where you ended up. And then, you know, I had written to Prabhupada, but I didn't let people know where I was. Because I like to be independent. I had a little bit too much of that in my personality. But anyway, so then once I was discovered, I started thinking, well, you know, my boy's getting to be about almost 2.5 years old, got to have association. So we moved to Dallas. They had just bought the Gurley Street place, and I started working on that.
Who became the president when you left here?
When I left here, well, it was kind of taken over by the GBC. And I think Mukundlal was, there was an interim thing, and Mukundlal took over eventually and kept it. Now there's another part to that, to the St. Louis Yatra too, that this would almost not have happened had it turned out differently. While I was in Dallas, I fast forward, I went here, there, and everywhere, and I ended up in Dallas after Oklahoma. In Dallas, I got wind that the St. Louis Temple had closed, and it was boarded up. And I immediately asked some GBC if I could go, and they said no, and I said, well, try to stop me. I'm going. And so I went there, and then Sasrup Maharaj, and I say this respectfully, he wrote Prabhupada. I have the letter, and Prabhupada said, I'll quote the letter, because that's the best way to do it. If I can find it. It's a very important
While you're looking for that, Vamana Prabhu, we're so much indebted to you, your initial determination to open the temple.
Well, thank you for that, but I think I have to defer my enthusiasm and my determination to just trying to please Prabhupada. And I saw what he had done, and this is nothing compared to what he went through. So, so in this letter to Sasrup Maharaj, he said, I'm sorry for this. I have it outlined. Well, in the paraphrase said, he said, basically leave Vamandev alone. Let him go there, and he will let him do what he needs to do. So that was, so he told Sasrup that let him back off, let him do it. He's going to do it anyway, so just let him do it. So I went there, and there's another backstory to that. As I mentioned earlier, the elderly couple and I had a rapport. I was supporting them by way of paying their monthly thing, and they hadn't been paid in 3 or 4 months. They were going to repossess the place. They had to, because they had no choice. And I went and I pleaded with them, please, I'll make up the money. By that time, I was all right, because I was working. And I said, I'll make up the back rent. And I make up the back rent, and they forgave everything, no penalties, just, it was only, $1,000 or something, but maybe a little bit more. But I made it up and reopened St. Louis Temple, and then that's when all the likes of this whole commune moved in, and of course Jadaratma was there. He came, and it flowered again. It just, as soon as I opened the door, I couldn't even stop them. They just it was like you open a vacuum seal, and the devotees just went in there. So and then after I stabilized it, I gave it over to Mukundma again. I think it was that. That part I have to figure out who took over and all that. But it was reopened, and it flourished. And then in 1977, this is another footnote. The person early in the negotiations with the building, I said it was bought in my name, but then I transferred it over to ISKCON of St. Louis Incorporated. So they called me from City Hall, said that this building has been by eminent domain to build this property, this housing for nurses at Barnes Hospital. We have made an offer, and do you accept this offer? And I said yes, and they said, well, we'll make the check out to you. And I said, no, you make it out to ISKCON, because that's ISKCON's building. And they said, well, you can take the money because you had it first. And I said, I can't do that. I wouldn't do that. And that money is what bought this building. So, and so so that's, but we almost lost that building. We almost lost it. So there's a little intrigue going on here, and I don't want to take.
Most of us don't know anything of all these historical details regarding St. Louis.
Yeah, I have many sub things too. I mean, there's so many. Another really nice thing. I am writing it. That's what this.
But besides your biography.
Oh yeah, history. Well. Mm-hmm.
The history.
Well, I don't know anything past about 72, 73. So that I can do up to this, and then if anyone. But let me tell you. Yeah, I'm going to supply that. There's one other thing. I'm a starter, but I'm going to pass the torch because I want to start something else. And that's what that was my lure to coming to St. Louis, because
Ready
it's,
for a new temple.
you want a new temple?
I said we're ready for one.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
Say no.
Actually, I do have a plan, but I'm not gonna let it out of the bag yet. I have some plan. But it's more of a retreat and a refuge and acreage. But I'm not, that's all you're gonna get. That's all you're gonna there was one other final thing I wanted to say, and it escapes me because I didn't write it down. So I think I'm gonna have to leave it there, but if it comes up before I say the last word, that's,
Shankar Pandit, you want to prod him? You're good at getting
Yeah.
him to speak something more. You want to get him to say something more?
Please say something more about it.
okay. Okay,
Very crafty.
yeah, well, that was my problem, I didn't
What
know.
about, do you know any of the historical background of how Sri Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj?
No, I don't,
They-
Chatharama has
alluded
all
to
the,
it, but
yeah.
He kept saying Vamana Deva will explain more.
Well, he explained everything up to the point there, because whatever small home deities we had, they were Indira's, and they went with him. So,
So tomorrow morning, if something comes into your mind between now and tomorrow
oh,
morning,
I'll,
you can get the microphone first tomorrow morning.
okay, but, yes. Who do I hand this over to?
Thank you, Mataji.
Oh,
Vamana Deva Prabhu,
Yes.
thank you so much for, I mean, now we all know so much unknown historical connection to the St. Louis system.
there. Well, thank you very much, and there are a lot of tendril things that hook in. Oh, one of them was, this is what I was doing. One of them was the Sunday feast program. Once that Post-Dispatch thing came out, how was I going to maintain, and this was before we moved into the Cleat Avenue, that Post-Dispatch thing came out. But they started pouring in, that's why we had so many shoes there. But we had to feed 50 people, at least, on $150 a week, plus I had to pay utilities, not utilities, but rent, to the thing, and I had a pregnant wife, and I mean, this goes on and on, so, I was just scratching my head and say, okay, we got to figure this one out. So we went to the farmer's market, and we, tried to buy bulk and stuff, but it's still, it still costs a lot of money. So we saw them throwing all this stuff away, and we said, aha. So and they had these big crates, and I wrote Hare Krishna on these crates, and I put them behind every one of them. I said, before you throw it away, put the good stuff in here. Especially at the end of the day, we'll come and we'll take it away. You won't have to put it in the dumpster. So at the end, every Saturday, we would go there. We had a van, and we filled that van up, and we spent all Saturday evening. Joe probably got a few knife cuts because we cut up so much, and we would have the feast with more. In fact, we had feast boga left over, and we told the hippies and whoever else came, if you need any food, take it, because we can't even use it all.
That set a standard for other temples, because that's what they did in Boston. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Yeah, you can get it. And another thing, when I went later to Dallas, we had the Gurukula going there, so we needed more milk. So I went to the dairy, and I said, all these return things, because they're either expired or about to expire, please give them to me. And I had a pickup truck, and I had loads of milk and yogurt and all kinds of stuff, and brought it to this temple. And yogurt, of course, doesn't go bad, and the milk, if it goes bad, you turn it into yogurt. So, this, there's no problem, So anyway, that was the other piece I wanted to put in, that Krishna provides. Oh, there's so many little things. We had a very nice, there's another one, a very nice reception when it didn't happen at our universities there, but it happened at Kent State when they had that shooting. And we did in support of the students, they had a big sit-in at Forest Park, and we went there for Sankirtan and had a really nice presence there, made some devotees from that. So that you just maximize, 4, 5, 6, 8 of us, and we just spread out and did what we had to do. So, Haribol Prabhu.
Okay.
Bro, could I just read one quick thing? There's a letter
Let
from
him-
Prabhupada to you. It's
Yes.
just a couple sentences.
Okay.
I found in the book the compilation of Prabhupada's letters. So, this was March 25th.
Yeah,
1971.
Wait for the microphone, so.
Oh.
those
1971?
online, they can hear it.
19 what?
1971. You have got so many Tulsi plants there.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
nice. So you can grow more. And the climate, is the climate suitable for growing? Hawaii is undoubtedly suitable, but St. Louis also? Anyway, it is growing, and that is Mother Tulsi's great favor.
Yes, that I have to attribute to my wife of the time, Indira. She was had a really green thumb, especially remarking in regards to Tulsi. And we had a grow room with grow lights. That's how we did it. But there's another, let me do an anecdotal tie-in with Tulsi at the point, since you brought it up. We were in London, once again a starter that George Harrison had just given us that building, and I was there with Sam Sunder and about 4 or 5 other people. Before it was, just as the doors opened, we walked in, and there was nothing there. We were just sitting at a table, and George called us up, and we listened to My Sweet Lord or something. And anyway, but we ended up there. When we first went, we went to the Bury place, and they had a Tulsi room. And at that time, we had a child. This was, and I think she was, and this was before we went back to St. Louis to open it up. She was pregnant for the second child, and so we had to find a quiet place to sleep, and that Tulsi room was perfect. Until they found out that she was sleeping in the Tulsi room. I could sleep anywhere, but she was sleeping there with the baby. And then she said, well, these aren't Tulsi. And you should have seen the face of those people. They were ready to hang us. She said, these are basil. These are sweet basil. Because she knows the difference. We raised them in St. Louis. We know what Tulsis look like. And sure enough, when Prabhupada came about a week later, or 2 weeks later, he said, these aren't Tulsi. These are sweet basil. So we were exonerated, but we got kicked out anyway. Again. I have this thing, I just getting booted all the time. I can't shut that off. I don't know what happened. It just went crazy. Yeah, okay. So we got booted out of there, and this became just just part of my rasa with devotees. But don't boot me out anymore. I'm just kidding.
And he is still here. So, okay. This is actually the first time I've been to St. Louis. I'm not the first Rife, I'm the second one. And, but, however, if you'd like to hear some stories, I can tell you what was going on in my world while he was doing this. It was, is that okay?
Yes.
A few things. First, I came, just a little background real quick. I came in Laguna Beach, California. I grew up in California in September of '69. Okay, Prabhupada came in December, and they had chosen, this is a classic picture, which I have it on Facebook, but it's hard to see on my phone. So Prabhupada was coming, so they chose 2 of us young ladies to flank Prabhupada coming through the airport. And Sahadevi was one. She was throwing rose petals, and I was the other one. And I had this bright blue flowered sari on with an orange bowl in front of me with rose water. And we walked next to Prabhupada the whole way. And practically, Prabhupada was surrounded mainly by ladies. And you would see a couple of men, one holding the umbrella and, you know, somebody fanning him, you know, but mostly there were ladies surrounding Prabhupada. This is in December of '69. So it's a really classic photo because you don't see that after that, you know. The ladies aren't near Prabhupada. So in January of '70, I was initiated. It was toward the end of the month. The next day, Gargamuni, prior to that, Gargamuni had pulled me into the spiritual sky room. This is at La Cienega Temple, which I went to La Cienega about a month after I moved into Laguna Beach. So he pulled me in and said, hey, what would you think about marrying Upendra? And I said, who is he? This is the mood and the flavor of early days, right? And he said, well, he's Prabhupada's servant, and you know, he cooks for Prabhupada and travels with him. And I went, oh, that sounds pretty good. Okay. I'll get to see more of Prabhupada. All right. So the day after I received first initiation, I was married to Upendra, who was Prabhupada's servant throughout, off and on throughout, from the beginning of when he came. When Upendra first moved in, the first thing, about 2 weeks later, Prabhupada said, come and live with me. So, you know, from the early days of '67 all the way through, he was off and on trading off with Shrudakirti or Nandakumar or, you know, others. And he was mainly his cook and servant. You know, so I usually had an in through the back door if I was in the area. Yeah. So back to next day I was married to Upendra. The next weekend I received second initiation. So wrap your head around that. And after 4 months in the temple, I had 3 fire sacrifices in 2 weekends. You know, basically a week and a half. I had 3 fire sacrifices.
First initiation, second initiation, marriage.
Yeah, first marriage and then second.
And Prabhupada was there for all 3?
Prabhupada was there for all 3, although the marriage ceremony, I believe he had Gargamuni. Yes, Gargamuni conducted the marriage ceremony, the fire sacrifice part. But Prabhupada was there. And Prabhupada did sign our marriage certificate. Because Upendra was his servant, you know. So right around that time, what had happened, Prabhupada got a letter from Bali Mardan, who was in Australia, right? And Bali Mardan was asking for help. And Upendra's reading the letter to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada's just looking at him. And Upendra looked up and he said, no, Prabhupada. Who's going to cook for you, Prabhupada? Who's going to take care of you? And he said, anyone can do that. So about a week after we got married, Upendra took off for Australia. And I stayed in, you know, he was going to see what it was like, and then I was going to come over. Well, I knew when later I was brought to Australia for a reunion, and I was able to visit the actual first building in Sydney, and I knew why I wasn't allowed to go at that time. Krishna protected me because that building was deserted, broken windows. It's like they were just squatting in this empty shell of a building. And I went, oh, okay, I get it. You know, maybe I wouldn't have made that. But so he and Bali Mardan, this was in Sydney, they started that while I was serving in LA and then San Francisco. And then there was a little trend there. He was complaining because he felt like the temple in San Francisco, they weren't allowing me to leave and go get my visa and things like that, which is probably true. And so he complained to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada told Madhavisa he had to let me go. And I tried to get my visa, but they wouldn't let me, they wouldn't give me a visa because he had already applied for a residence and I was trying to come in on a visitor's visa. And Australia doesn't like things like that. So that didn't happen then for me. In the meantime, Upendra went to Fiji, and I met him 7 months after we were married in Fiji. Fiji was an every town and village experience, literally, because it was half Hindu population and half basically Fijian, and it was run by the English government. So, there were incidences, we moved into a basement apartment with windows, and, Upendra says, Chitraleka, turn around, look out the windows. And the little village of Fijians that lived a couple hundred yards away from us, they had all gathered around the outside of the building and were looking in with big bright eyes and smiles, watching us move in, like we were in a cage, It was the local thing. And, things like we had an engagement up on the top, up a mountain in Fiji. And it was a little Hindu village there. And they had this ancient deity, just stone, in a stone-like temple outside, very rustic and ancient. So they had contracted us to come up there, and we went, took a bus with no windows, just flaps to keep the rain out. But it was a one-lane road up this mountain, and the one side was a valley, that would drop off. There was there was no way around it. If another car was coming the opposite way, they had to back up, or we had to back up. We made it to the top, and we had our event there. We slept under a mosquito net, and there was no air conditioning or anything. It was very rustic, and I thought, this is every town and village. This is it's amazing. And then we, after the program, the next day we came back down the mountain in that same bus with one lane all the way down the mountain, curvy road. So there were scary times, but it's like we were doing anything to please Prabhupada, to push on the movement, and it was an amazing time to be in the movement. Later we were asked to leave by the English government. They wouldn't renew our visas after 6 months, so Prabhupada said we could come to India, and we arrived in Calcutta with in the middle of the night at Dum Dum Airport, and we took a taxi over to Albert Road, went up the stairs and tried to bang on the door, and nobody answered because it's early in the morning, too early for Mangal Arti. But we knew it was the right door because all the shoes were outside.
What year?
This was 1971, April 71. And so we decided, well, let's just roll our sleeping bag out, and sleep there until they get up for Mangal Arti, and then we can get in. So we did that, but the neighbors down at the bottom, where all the cubby holes and the people who lived in the area there they heard us banging and they thought we were thieves. So they came up with torches and clubs, you know. And that was our introduction to India. So, yeah, that was the welcome wagon. That was the early days. And then we got inside, you know, when they woke up and went upstairs with our things. You know, we had, I forget what we had, but we had a couple of sleeping bags and a couple of suitcases. And all the householders, which there were 5 couples, I remember that. We lived upstairs in the attic and with madrasas hung between us. You know, so everybody had a cubby hole with a madras hung between them. And that was Jamuna, Guru Das. We stayed right next to them. And Tamal and Madri and Koshalya and Durlab, and you know, I'm not sure the other couple, but I remember 5 of us. So that's where we stayed right off landing. So that's that brings us, yeah, that's 71. That just about covers the time that you were talking about. This little piece though is really nice, which I was talking to Anutama, and I forgot your name, but Valadev, yes, that's right, about it, was after about a month Upendra left, and I loved India and he didn't. So I stayed with Prabhupada and all the devotees there, and he left. And later he went back to Australia, and I was there for about 9 months. At the end of that 9 months, that was a very exciting time to be there, you know, because we were with Prabhupada all the time, pretty much. The pandals or darshans in his room every evening when he was there in Calcutta, you know, darshans in Delhi, and then he took 40 of us to Vrindavan on a tour around Vrindavan.
You were there on that tour?
Yes, I was, yeah. And after Jamuna was still recovering from jaundice, and Palika had fallen sick with it on the way there. So Tamal left me with the 2 of them. We stayed in Prabhupada's quarters at Saraf Bhavan in Vrindavan for a month after that week with Prabhupada, and he left with everyone. We stayed and had a glorious time exploring Vrindavan. You know, it was the highlight of my Krishna conscious career, you know. It really made the day when things got rough later. That wasn't rough, you know. That was ecstatic all the time, you know. So it was, yeah, it was the... Oh, that's a quick story. Okay, that was nice. So during that time, Calcutta, we would go sometimes to life members' houses for an event with Prabhupada. And this time there was a life member event, and all the men left and said there is no room for us. So the men left, and we were still at the temple, and Prabhupada hadn't left yet. So there were about 3 or 4 of us. We lined up by the temple door to say bye to Prabhupada as he was leaving. And so we're standing there, oh, Hare Krishna, Prabhupada, and he says, aren't you coming? And we said, oh, the men left and there wasn't any room for us. And he says, oh, you come with me. And so Prabhupada took us to the event in the back of his car. The 4 of us crammed into the back seat, and Prabhupada was in the front, and we sort of got there. We're here. Prabhupada brought us. And later, you know, this is by January of 72, then to fast forward just a little bit, Prabhupada was in Calcutta and I was there, and he called me into his room and I offered obeisances and said, yes, Prabhupada. And he said, so when are you going to join your husband? And my heart sank. You know, it's sort of like Upendra had to be writing Prabhupada. You know, my wife doesn't answer my letters. I don't know where she is. Prabhupada would answer, she's fine, she's helping with the ladies. And so I said, soon, Prabhupada. So my mother had given me $40, sent it to me, and in India. So I asked Prabhupada then if I could purchase Radha Krishna deities for Melbourne Temple. And I would go join him in Melbourne. And Prabhupada gave me the okay to purchase the deities. No, he said he wanted someone to go with me so I didn't get cheated. Well, no one wanted to go with me, so I went anyway and bought the deities. I'm a little independent, you know. But, I went and bought the deities and paraphernalia, and got everything lined up. They sent a ticket, and I flew off to Melbourne. I got off the plane. They also wanted a mridanga, so I waddled off the plane with the deities on one shoulder, nice brass Radha Krishna who are still there and worship beautifully, and a mridanga on the other shoulder. You get that? And I'm not very big, really, so. No, I'm not. I was even smaller then. I put on weight, you know.
When you returned to Australia with the deities, 71, 72?
That was 72. That was 72. That was, I believe it was January, maybe early February. I'd have to look up, but. And Prabhupada was going to be coming in March to install them. So I had my marching orders intact then. I sewed all their clothes, several outfits. One was, I was a little creative like that. I'd been sewing all my life. So, you know, I made them a white outfit, and Krishna had, is that the one? I'm not sure. Krishna had a tuxedo in one of them. Yeah. 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 Well, I don't remember which outfit I put on them, but I don't remember that piece. I don't. But I do know when it came to install them, I didn't like to be in the limelight at all, so I sort of hid out in the back room, you know, and it got to the time to dress them, and nobody could figure out how to put the clothes on them. So Prabhupada asked for me and waited until I got out to the fire sacrifice to dress the deities while he watched. And yeah, he watched, yeah. So that was, that's a few stories. There's some really fun ones about the kids, but, oh, well, I'm not on tomorrow.
Oh.
Only you are.
Well, I'll have to get you on.
Do we have time? Or does anyone want to hear a couple of stories about the children?
Yes.
Okay, you sure? Some of you probably have kids, so maybe. Yeah, yeah, yes, Opal. She's very sweet. So my children, again, because Upendra was serving Prabhupada, I usually could just fly off and meet up, you know, somewhere along the way, because I knew Prabhupada was there too. So I had two children at that time, Somya, this trip was to India. We were going to Vrindavan. So Somya and Shantaya. Somya was 3 and Shantaya was 1. And I flew with them by myself because Upendra was already there with Prabhupada. And we arrived in Vrindavan, and I right away went into darshan. He was having darshan in his rooms there. And so the brahmachari at the door said, well, just sit in the back, sit in the back. And I went, okay. So I sat down in the back, and right away, Shantaya, the 1-year-old, gets up to start walking around, and the brahmachari at the door is flipping out. He's like losing his cool, totally. He's, motioning to me, get her, And I looked up at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada says, like this. So Shantaya continues to toddle up to Prabhupada at his desk and sit on his lap. Wow. And Prabhupada allowed it. Prabhupada allowed that, So she sat there on his lap for several minutes, just Hare Krishna, Jai, Shri Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj ki Jai. She sat there on his lap playing with things on his desk until she started touching too much. And then he picked up a flower and handed it to her. And I was watching him the whole time, waiting for my cue. And then he looked at me, and he nodded his head. And I came up and got her and took the kids in, and we went out, and I sort of gloated at the brahmachari as I left. But Prabhupada knew us, because of Upendra. Prabhupada knew us, because we would show up, and he knew I was, we were married, and I would sometimes go into his room with just Somya, and just for a darshan, just the two of us, And, Prabhupada would tease him. His glasses are bigger than his head. He wore glasses from the age of 2. And, so it was very sweet. But this story, I have to tell you, just this last one, okay. Somya, it was that same trip to Vrindavan, and Somya, of course, is 3 years old, and Prabhupada is leaving. He's at the gate, surrounded by men, sannyasis, all the men had a big circle, and he stopped, and so he stopped standing there near the gate with all the men around him, and Somya always had a flower to give Prabhupada. I would make sure he had a flower to give Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was leaving. It was time for Somya to give him a flower. So I pushed my way through the men and pushed Somya into the center. And he's standing there with a flower, and he has these big glasses on, right? And he's looking around at everybody and looking for Prabhupada. But all these, sannyasis and dandas, and, it's a little overwhelming. So Prabhupada, standing there watching him, he picks up his cane and he taps him on his shoulder and says, "Here I am, over here." Somya continues to look around, looking for him, and Prabhupada continues tapping him on the shoulder. "Here I am, over here." And Somya is still looking around. Prabhupada taps him on the head. "Here I am, over here." And at that point, I was cracking up. But I pushed my way through the men again and turned Somya. I said, "There's Prabhupada. Give him your flower." And he gave him his flower and left, yeah. So it was... Prabhupada was just so personal with the children. He loved them. He never withheld affection from them or, didn't want them around or anything. He, if he's giving class, of course, we keep them quiet or out of the way. But in general, when it was time to interact with the children, Prabhupada was right there. He was the grandfather, you know. So it was sweet. So thank you, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Sri Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj ki jai. Sri Sri Krishna Balaram ki jai. Sri Nitai-Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. We're hearing some very, very interesting and amazing stories, especially what you, Vamanadev Prabhu, shared just regarding the history of St. Louis ISKCON, because after all, this is the meaning of this particular reunion, the 50th anniversary of the installation of their lordships, Sri Sri Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj. So naturally, whenever Krishna appears in his deity form, a temple must be there. Devotees must be there to receive him, to greet him, to offer him bhakti and so many other types of seva. So because of your efforts, Vamanadev Prabhu, their lordships had a building, they had devotees to accept worship, so we're indebted to you. So thank you so much for your enthusiasm and dedication to open a temple here in St. Louis. My connection with St. Louis ISKCON is not as eventful as Vamanadev Prabhu. I didn't have any harrowing experiences driving to St. Louis, nor was I kicked out of various places, fortunately. But my first contact with St. Louis ISKCON was when it was on Laclede Avenue. Now, just to give a little background information regarding my service and how I came to St. Louis, I'm originally from Washington, D.C. So during the summer of 1972, that was when I first met devotees from ISKCON. It was one Prabhu in particular named Balaka Das. I don't know if any of you know him or not, but mostly his service was connected to Los Angeles ISKCON, like in 1970, 1971. Ironically, Balaka Prabhu had relatives living in Washington, D.C. So he took a break from his service in Los Angeles and came to visit his father and other relatives in Washington, D.C. And Balaka Prabhu, I may say, black body, tall, slender, fair complexioned, and extremely charismatic. In fact, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj knew Balaka before they both joined ISKCON, because they both were involved in various types of spirituality and metaphysical pursuits. So just as we know, Bhakti Tirtha Swami was very charismatic, energetic, Balaka Prabhu had that same type of intensity, attractive features, but amplified manyfold. So Balaka Prabhu visited his relatives in Washington, D.C., and in the area I grew up, bordering Washington and Maryland, there's a very large, beautiful park called Riggs Park. And during the summer, that's where the city would conduct all types of events, like events for children, live music, food vendors. It was just a place to be during the summer months. So I was there with a lot of my neighborhood friends, and Balaka Prabhu came in the midst of all of that and started preaching Krishna consciousness. So that started my journey in Krishna consciousness. This was in 1972. By 1973, I was already living in the Washington, D.C. temple. Damodar was the temple president. And at that time, many devotees who became famous, being connected to the BI, the Bhaktivedanta Institute, were there. I was a Bhakta. There was Bhakta Richard, who eventually became Sadhuputta Prabhu. There was Bhakta Mike, who became Druta Karma. And so we had this wonderful mesh of devotees. The temple was thriving, very dynamic. And then after a few months, the temple president mentioned to me, said there's going to be an initiation ceremony in New Vrindavan, and I'm going to recommend some of you to take first initiation from Srila Prabhupada. So I was one of those particular devotees recommended by Damodar. So after being in the temple maybe 6 months, now I'm in New Vrindavan. The summer of 1974, hundreds of devotees were there, and that's when I took first initiation. Now, I just want to make a particular point. When I went before Srila Prabhupada to accept the beads from his hand and recite what are the 4 regulative principles and the vows that I'll follow, these sort of things, the devotees indicated when you go offer your obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, recite your pranam mantra recite Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra loudly so he can hear. So I was a young teenager, already intimidated by the atmosphere, hundreds of devotees. The initiation ceremony took place outside because there was no way that everyone could fit inside the New Vrindavan temple room. So when I went up to offer my obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, he was flanked by so many sannyasis, and it's a very intimidating atmosphere, actually. So I recited my pranam mantras, and then as soon as I sat up, one of the sannyasis, Vishnujan Swami, said, Srila Prabhupada didn't hear you. Again, offer your obeisances and recite your pranam mantra loudly. So I'm sweating, I'm nervous. Again, I recited it very loud. And then when I looked up, it was evident Srila Prabhupada heard me. And Srila Prabhupada handed me the beads and said, your name is Shankara Pandit Das. All I could hear was Shankara. And so what made matters worse, another devotee, the next devotee after me, Srila Prabhupada initiated him with the name Shankara Das. So I became very confused, and I became convinced, because I'm so fallen and unqualified, Prabhupada gave my name to someone else. I was literally thinking that. And so after the initiation ceremony, I went to my temple president. He congratulated me, you're initiated, Jai, it's wonderful. I said, well, what is my name? And they checked on the list. They said, okay, there's a Shankara Das. That was the other devotee. I said, okay, and your name is Shankara Pandit Das. I said, well, what does that mean? And again, this was 1974, and many of the Western devotees weren't so familiar with Sanskrit names and terms. So, oh, Shankar, well, it's the name of Lord Shiva, which is true. I said, okay. I said, well, what does Pandit mean? Well, kind of means teacher. So it means you're the servant of the teacher of Lord Shiva. I said, Jai. It was confusing, but I accepted it. And believe it or not, it wasn't until years later when Srila Prabhupada translated many of the volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita, while the Lord was performing his pastimes in Jagannath Puri, one of his intimate associates was named Shankara Pandit. And this particular associate of the Lord would massage Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the room known as Gambhira. During Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's later pastimes, when he became so overwhelmed with Mahabhava, very ecstatic, very exalted, rare exhibitions of love of Godhead, in order to give solace to the Lord, Shankar Pandit would massage the Lord, and then the Lord would calm down, relax, like that. So then I felt very honored having that name, Shankar Pandit Das. So fast forward to 1976. So last time I saw Srila Prabhupada in this world, and that was at the very famous 1976 New York Rath Yatra. I don't know if any of you were present for that. That was the first time Srila Prabhupada visited this magnificent temple in New York. That was that skyscraper building, West 55th Avenue, something like 8 or 9 stories. I mean, huge building. And Srila Prabhupada was very, very proud of it. On the side, it was in a very upscale part of Manhattan, business district actually. And on the side of the building in huge copper letters, you could see Hare Krishna from blocks away. Prabhupada was very proud of the building. So this was Srila Prabhupada's first time visiting that temple, and it was the first time that the New York Rath Yatra went down Fifth Avenue, although it's been going for many years, but that was the first time. So because I was distributing books as my main service, so even before the Rath Yatra, I was in New York distributing books, different places, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Harlem, so many places, leading up to the Rath Yatra. So Adi Keshava, the New York Temple president and GBC representative, acknowledging my book distribution service, that when Srila Prabhupada comes, I'm going to directly introduce you to him and let him know that you're distributing his books. Not just me, but with the small party of book distributors I was with. So I became very, very happy with that. So sure enough, after Prabhupada settled in his quarters, and he was in New York during that time for about 4 or 5 days, giving classes, room conversations, obviously the Rath Yatra attendance. So one of the days, Adi Keshava Swami took me and the other devotees of the book distribution party, formally introduced us to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, here is Balaka Das, this is Shankar Pandit Das, Raghunandana, there's different devotees. They've been distributing a book, Srila Prabhupada, they're very dedicated, and we had gifts that we offered to Srila Prabhupada individually, individual gifts, flowers, different things that Srila Prabhupada accepted very graciously. And when Adi Keshava was just giving Srila Prabhupada ideas of how we're distributing books and the individuals we're confronting and the quantity of the books we're distributing, you could see he was very pleased. So then Prabhupada looked at all of us individually, very deeply in our eyes. And as Adi Keshava was speaking, Prabhupada, they don't want to do anything else but distribute your books. And when Prabhupada looked at me for many, many seconds, just looking, and his eyes were very bright, you could see it slightly smiling, and then he said, thank you for distributing my books, thank you. And my heart fluttered. I was thinking, why should Srila Prabhupada be thanking me? I should be thanking him for everything. But this just goes to show, as even Vamanadev Prabhu and Chitralekha Mataji is pointing out, Srila Prabhupada created that family mood. He made you feel very comfortable. And whether you're rendering externally or superficially big service or just doing something seemingly insignificant, Prabhupada always noticed and gave encouragement. So then Adi Keshava, after our brief meeting with Srila Prabhupada, he said, Shankar, I want you to be one of Srila Prabhupada's guards. I said, what do you mean being a guard? First of all, I'm not like an experienced fighter or don't know anything about self-defense. What do you mean, guard? And who am I to guard Srila Prabhupada? He's personally protected by Krishna. So Adi Keshava said, no, he said, because we don't want Srila Prabhupada being disturbed while he's in his quarters. We just want devotees to sit outside his room to make sure he's not disturbed or anything. He said, don't worry, others are there, Pradyumna, Harisari, and others, but we just want one of the local devotees also. Would you like to do this? I said, yes, because that meant I would see Srila Prabhupada during the entire duration, and Adi Keshava said, yes, you can go and sit in the room conversations. And so on one occasion, Srila Prabhupada came out of one of his rooms because his room occupied, losing its power. Okay. Srila Prabhupada's quarters consisted of an entire floor. Srila Prabhupada's bedroom was one room, his sitting room where he would receive guests was another room, so there are like 4 different rooms. So at any given time, Srila Prabhupada could enter or exit any room. So on one occasion, he came out of his bedroom to enter the front room to receive guests in his main sitting room. So naturally, Pradyumna, Harisari, and other members of Srila Prabhupada's entourage said, at any given time you see Srila Prabhupada, stop what you're doing, immediately offer your obeisances. So I remember in New Vrindavan 2 years prior, okay, if I see Prabhupada, I'm going to recite my pranam mantra loudly. So sure enough, Srila Prabhupada came out of one of his rooms, and 3 or 4 of us were sitting. 3 or 4 of us were sitting in the corridor near Srila Prabhupada's different rooms. And sure enough, Prabhupada came out of one of the rooms. He didn't immediately enter another room, but he stood there just looking to see who was there. So all of us offered our obeisances. And I was somewhat the last one offering obeisances because it was somewhat of a small corridor. And Pradyumna, Harisari, and other members of Srila Prabhupada's entourage, naturally they were with me. So I let them offer their obeisances first, and then I offered mine. Then I offer my pranam mantra to Srila Prabhupada very loudly. And obviously Srila Prabhupada remembers everything, knows who we all are individually. So when I looked up at him, he was smiling and nodded that, yes, I heard you. So that was just that interesting connection from when I took first initiation, and then 2 years later was able to have that type of exchange again with Srila Prabhupada. But while I was in the New York temple at that time, celebrating the Rath Yatra with Srila Prabhupada, the other devotees, at that time the Radha Damodar bus party had all of the buses there. And I was so attracted to all of these brahmacharis on the Radha Damodar bus party. I was already distributing books, but I could just see these Prabhus were living in comfort, vans, living a very adventurous life, traveling city to city. So that's when I decided to join the Radha Damodar bus party, 1976. And on that party is when I came to St. Louis, many years later, maybe 1979. And at that time, the temple was on Laclede Avenue. Vamanade Prabhu, I don't think you were there at that particular time when I visited. 78 or maybe. Okay, could have been 19, but. Right, I don't remember you being there, but that was my first connection with St. Louis ISKCON. And at the same time, this temple, the building had already been acquired and construction was going on while the other devotees were still living at the Laclede location. So I remember, even though I was a visiting book distributor, we would come and look at this building. And I remember you, at that time, Vamanade Prabhu, was here in this particular room, which is now the temple room, but it was a bare concrete floor. These columns were also bare and perhaps made of concrete. And yes. And although I didn't know Vamanade Prabhu at the time, but I just saw he was so busy chopping, hammering, sawing. I mean, he was just completely focused on. Then I asked, who is that? So that's Vamanade Prabhu. And then there was another devotee who was assisting you, or just others who were just all part of the construction project. One was Datta Das, and I knew him, and they were all so busily focused on this particular temple. And it was Vamanade Prabhu who spearheaded the project in terms of the construction, the renovation, the building, etc. Then, sometimes as a Brahmachari book distributor, I would visit Chicago ISKCON. So maybe around 1979, 1980, I visited that temple. Kalki Prabhu was a temple president. And what impressed me was, here is Kalki, the temple president, and Vamana Prabhu upstairs in the men's ashram quarters, in the bathroom, hammering, sawing, installing toilets, shower stalls, everything. So a lot of the construction, many of our ISKCON temples came from Vamanade Prabhu. In fact, he just told me last night, he said, have you ever visited Gitanagari? And I said, yes. Has anyone in this room visited our Gitanagari communities? Many. Vamanade Prabhu was responsible for building those houses, pretty much all of the buildings on the Gitanagari project. The Mahabharata describes there's one heavenly architect named Visvakardama. And he's designed buildings for all of the devatas, all of the demigods. So Vamanade Prabhu is like the ISKCON version of Visvakardama, because he has literally built temples and other facilities throughout ISKCON. So again, as far as my St. Louis ISKCON, I officially moved to St. Louis ISKCON in maybe 1980. At that time, Suradas was the president. Sri Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj was here. And then gradually, Krishna Balaram deities came. Met these particular deities. But no, Krishna Balaram, Krishna was in blackish form, and Balaram white, marble form. And they looked just like the Krishna Balaram deities at our Vrindavan ISKCON temple. So somehow along the years of their worship, because they're very delicate, I believe they became chipped or something and then needed to be replaced. So then gradually these particular Krishna Balaram deities came. But during that time of St. Louis ISKCON's history, 1980, mid-80s, it was an all Brahmachari temple. And it was a base for book distribution. The most successful or most successfully empowered book distributors of North America were living in this particular temple. You had Vaisheshika Prabhu, full-time brahmachari living here. Magendra Prabhu, full-time devotee. Naikatma Prabhu, and of course Suradas Prabhu was the president. Who else? Pragosh. Although he was connected to New York ISKCON, he was still coming, spending extended time here. Tripurari Swami, who Prabhupada said he's an incarnation of book distribution. He would spend time here. So we just had a very, very dynamic atmosphere. I mean, you can imagine, it was all brahmacharis, very enthusiastic, fired up book distributors, and Govinda's restaurant was open. Chota Haridas, Srila Prabhupada disciple, was the cook, and every day for lunch, easily 40 to 50 customers. And we had incredible recipes, Vedic dishes like typical rice, sabzis, dal, pakoras, bhajia, chapatis, but then pizza slices, and then things that Westerners could really relate to. Chota Haridas would make his own beverages, fruit beverages, sodas. One was called Chota Soda. And that was everyone's favorite. Yeah, because we had the machines, like in the restaurant, you see the bubbling and everything. Oh, what is that? That's a Chota Soda. Let me try it. Wow, that's fantastic. And then Suradas was the one that kind of designed all the menus. So one was called Chickpea of the Sea, like chana, chickpeas. Chickpea of the Sea. It was kind of like a mock meat dish wrapped in the chapati like a burrito with lettuce and everything, and people loved it. So just as Anuttama Prabhu was saying in his class this morning, we naturally have to devise ways and means to attract people to Krishna consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami says, Yena tena pakadena mana Krishna niveshayat. Srila Prabhupada will quote this often, meaning somehow or other, get people to think about Krishna. The rules and regulations can take place later. Just get people to think about Krishna, attract them to the temple one way or the other. So the restaurant was very successful. The book distribution is very successful. Devotees started coming. Bhaktas were joining the temple. Then ladies were coming. Sometimes Mataji's book distribution parties were coming through, and they wanted to stay. So then the temple management realized we need to make a ladies' ashram. So when you go outside the back parking lot, there are many apartment buildings. So one of the apartment buildings directly across this temple from the alley, we had 2 apartments that consisted of the ladies' ashram. And at one point, there was maybe 8 to 10 Matajis doing full-time service, coming, taking part. That was a ladies' ashram. And in order to systematically develop St. Louis ISKCON's preaching program, because bhaktas were joining, Matajis, ladies were joining, we required a bhakta leader. So ironically, Urjaswat Prabhu, some of you may know Urjaswat, he passed through, and he was very successful in making devotees. Like Vamanadev Prabhu was thinking, okay, just a few days before closing, how am I going to raise this money? All of a sudden, Krishna arranged for him to find a wallet full of money. So the St. Louis ISKCON management was thinking, we need someone to systematically develop these new Prabhus and ladies. Or just happened to be traveling, came through St. Louis ISKCON. He already had the reputation of being very expert in making devotees and nurturing them and helping them develop their Krishna consciousness. So he offered his services with certain conditions. And Suradas, those of you know Suradas was, as devotees like to say, he's like chutney. too hot to eat, but too sweet to resist. So Surya is also like Lord Shiva, Asutosh, easily pleased, easily irritated. So Urjaswat said, Surdas, Prabhu, I can easily come here and stay, be the bhakta leader, but I have some concerns and conditions. He said, what is that? He said, okay, come with me. I just want to show you. Let's walk outside the temple. So I was there for the conversation. So Urjaswat, Surdas, and I walked outside, Lindell Avenue in front of the temple. Urjaswat pointed to the front of the building, where the sign still says International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but it was a gray color. And Urjaswat said, this is the color of a battleship, gray. This looks dull. You need something bright color to attract people, to make it look appealing. So Surdas thought, okay, we can easily paint a different color. What are your other conditions? So Urjaswat said, well, this may be a major condition, but you'll have to give me $5,000. And Surya said, $5,000 for what? He said, do you want a bhakta leader in this temple? Yes. Then you need to give me $5,000. So Surya said, what is this? You're asking for a salary? He said, no, we need to remodel. We need to create a facility to attract new people. So of course Suryadas thought that was maybe too much, so they came to some type of mutual number they agreed upon, and sure enough, Urjaswat got to work and redesigned some of the rooms and everything, and within 6 months or 8 months, at least 4 or 5 new devotees, men and women, joined. So St. Louis ISKCON during that time, during the 1980s, was quite successful. That was when Gargamuni Prabhu started coming. I remember him very well. He was Bhakta Greg. And he was coming, eating at the restaurant, and bringing his wife and children, and Divyananda, who was Bhakta Jim, hair down to his waist. Believe it or not, where is Divyananda here? Oh, there he is. Okay, I didn't see him. What happened to the hair? Yeah, what happened to the hair? He shaved up. And now at his age, maybe it's not growing anymore. But Divyananda Prabhu was there. He was Bhakta Jim, coming to the restaurant, coming to the Bhakta classes and offering service. And yes, believe it or not, his hair was down to his waist. And he was very, very detached, just aloof, like an avaduta, just very aloof from anything. So yes, he's still like that. But as he became completely convinced about Krishna consciousness, Suryadas and the other local devotees, they saw that, and they said, well, Bhakta Jim, maybe you should just move in. He said, yeah, I think I'll do that. Even though he had his own apartment and everything, and he just walked away from his apartment. I mean, closed everything naturally, but just walked away, and he just said, hey, sir, well, I have a little money in the bank. How much did you have at that time? He had, and this was in the 1980s, from his work and everything. He said, well, I have a little money in the bank. What should I do with that? So he should offer it to Krishna. So he just withdrew everything and just, use it for Krishna consciousness. So during that time, the 1980s, yes, Divyananda Prabhu started coming, Gargamuni, who else? Chakra, of course, was already here, but... No, I came later. Oh, that's right. But, so during the 1980s, St. Louis ISKCON was very, very dynamic.
So how long were you here for?
I was here 1983.
So just 3 years.
Yes. And again, and of course, I was a book distributor, going out to the airport with Vaisheshika Prabhu, Naikatma Prabhu, Subudhi Rai Prabhu, I mean, all Srila Prabhupada disciples. Parthamitra, it was maybe 10 of us Prabhus, and then Pavani Mataji, Srila Prabhupada disciple, she was also, so we had maybe 10 or 12 devotees. Yes, Jadharani Mataji came here for a short time. She was painting Bhagavatam paintings and distributing books at the airport. For a few months she was here. So it was a very vibrant time. And then Suradas conceived of a very interesting program. Who has heard of, it's a secular corporation called the 500 Club. Has anyone heard of the 500 Club? You know, I don't know if it's still existing or not, but it was a very famous corporation in America, business corporation called 500 Club. So Suradas said, we should have an ISKCON version of the 500 Club, relating it to book distribution. He just said, well, look, we have the most successful book distributors in North America living here in St. Louis, ISKCON. Let's try to distribute 100 Bhagavad Gitas and collect $500, because at that time we're all distributing hardbound books, so $5 minimum was like the standard for receiving a hardbound Bhagavad Gita. So all of the book distributors, we all thought, yes, let's try it. Even though we knew it was, wow, 100 Bhagavad Gitas, okay, let's try. So sure enough, we loaded up the van with so many cases of Bhagavad Gitas. And in those days, we're distributing books from 10:30 in the morning, after breakfast prasadam, till 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. We're young, we had the stamina and everything. So at the end of the day, many Prabhus, and I caught myself, well, I did it. Big smile on his face. Then Vaisheshika Prabhu said, I did it. Shankar, what about you? I said, well, what time are we leaving? In about a half an hour. I said, I've distributed about 90. Yeah, you can do it. 10 more books within a half an hour. So sure enough, I did it. Suradas, so many of us. So that was considered for us as book distributors, members of the elite club, the 500 Club. And yes, all of us collected minimum $500 and distributed each 100 Bhagavad Gitas. And some, like Vaisheshika Prabhu, did it more than one day, more than one time, maybe 2 or 3 times. So these were some of the occurrences that took place in St. Louis ISKCON during the 1980s. It was a very dynamic, vibrant mood with Matajis, Prabhus. We would do Harinam quite regularly, once a week, different places, sometimes Laclede's Landing, sometimes by the Arch, sometimes just other places. And the residents of St. Louis really got to know, oh, you guys are the Hare Krishnas. Oh, yeah, you guys have a restaurant. So the visible presence of going out with our devotional attire, chanting Harinam, the Lord's holy names in public, it has a tremendous effect. Even Srila Prabhupada would remind the devotees, there are all types of living entities. In fact, the Vedas point out that there are 8,400,000 different species scattered throughout the universe. So Srila Prabhupada said the Hare Krishna mantra is so powerful that even the insects, the birds, the ants, they all hear that sound vibration and they will benefit if given the opportunity. So therefore the devotees of the Lord are the most benevolent. That is why we want to share Krishna consciousness with others, because it is beneficial for everyone, whether they become devotees or not. Just hearing the holy names of the Lord, just taking the books, touching the books, rendering service to the devotee, taking prasadam, that is to their eternal benefit. So we must keep everything in a perspective. Srila Prabhupada sacrificed so much for giving us Krishna consciousness by installing Gaura-Nitai deities, Radha Krishna deities, Jagannath deities throughout the world to give everyone an opportunity to receive the mercy of the Lord. So we must carry on Srila Prabhupada's legacy. Thank you.
Your actual schedule time is short, I'll make a short little statement. In terms of the chronological time, I came about 1986 here to St. Louis. But I remember we traveled a few times with Mahamuni Prabhu, and one time I remember stopping at the temple in Laclede Street. It was really austere. We had to take they only had cold water. I think we only stayed for one night, and I don't know if Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj were there yet. But anyway, we had to take an ice cold shower in the basement with a hose and a drain in the floor. That's really austere. Anyway, so I had come to visit there. And I remember one time also we came to visit a little later before I came here in a permanent sense in '86. We came one time and I stayed maybe for a little while. And one time we went on traveling Sankirtan, myself and Ayendra Prabhu, the famous Kirtan lit man, and Bhakta Tim from Chicago. And we went to Evanston, Indiana in Christmas time, and it was freezing cold, and we were working with Santa Claus suits outside in the street lights. And I had these Santa Claus boots on with big thick heels on and a beard and the whole rendition. And they were also doing it, Ayendra and Bhakta Tim. So I didn't want to do it because it was freezing cold. So I was so tall with the boots, the high heels on the boots, I was about 6'6". So I was just out there half days as I've been quite often at the streetlights. And so one time, I think it was the first day even, I didn't want to do it, and a car pulled up, and it was a police officer. And he was a real short guy. He was only about 5'5". So I was way above him, and he was looking up at me and saying like that, "You can't do this." And internally I was going, "Oh, thank you, Krishna." So I got sent back here to St. Louis, and I remember seeing Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj. I think it was the same Vyasa song we had. They were on the altar there, and I was kind of praying in the way I do to them and thanking them for letting me come back. Back then they were over there. And I was just saying, I was so grateful because it was so freezing cold. Of course, Bhakta Tim and Ayendra Prabhu, they didn't care. But I came back on the bus, and so I always remember that. In the newspaper, too, the next day in Evanston, Indiana, they had on the headlines, it happened to be the news reporter happened to be driving by, so he took a photo of that little tidbit. He took a photo, and it showed the police officer looking at me saying, and it said on the headlines, "Ho, ho, ho, no, no, no." So you can't do that. Anyway, that's just a little bit. But that's how I remember my relationship with Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj in the beginning. So, Hare
We need an encore to that one. There's got to be more. So what time is Prashadam?
We can go maybe by 1.
Yeah. So I just speak for a couple of minutes. Was just asked to be here because they put too many chairs up. So I actually didn't visit St. Louis too much later, so I don't want to maybe comment on that. I just want to maybe speak to the audience devotees that are listening to the old timers here. I mean, these are phenomenal stories with Prabhupada in India and Krishna arranging to kick you out from place to place to place, Vamanadev, because he had more service for you. And the policeman chastising Santa Claus. And Shankar Pandita's experiences with Prabhupada and all that. So I just comment that, as Ramapada Swami was saying, does everybody remember those 4 things he said?
Yes.
He said one was somebody should write the history. One was you should do more outreach on the colleges with the students. The other one was particularly to the Western preaching. And the 4th one was, the Bhadra Purnima festival. So just, as I think Maharaj also had mentioned, that, I think everybody here's, if not over 70, close to 70 plus. And we know, every year practically, because I oversee ISKCON News, so it's almost like, should we start anticipating obituaries? Seriously, like writing the story before they go, so we're ready to publish something in a hurry. So, I know sometimes I go places and people will say, like I heard a few times, the term the good old days. But we know it's predicted that the ISKCON society, Krishna consciousness, will be next 10,000 years, Lord Chaitanya's movement. So the good old days of like the first 30 years, the first 50 years, they're going to be talking about 100 years from now into the future will be part of the good old days. So everybody here, even like Opal and the other kids that were here, are and certainly the other adults here, are very much part of the pioneering days. This is like maybe the first wave of pioneers, but then there's a second and a third and a fourth wave of pioneers. It's not like, nobody here should allow your mind to say, oh, I missed all the action. I wish I was there in these exciting early times. Because last time I looked, there's only one Hare Krishna temple in St. Louis, right? And how many people are in St. Louis? How many? 300,000. That's probably just in the city, right? How many in the area? It's probably 1 million or so. It must be at least, right? So I know we had a nice Janmas, we had 5,000 people came, but so that means 995,000 people didn't. Right? So that means there's, and we distributed millions of books, but there's 340 some million people in the country. And maybe we've sold, I don't know, 100,000 sets of Bhagavatams, maybe at the most in the States, I think. But that means there's 339,990,000 people that don't have a set of Bhagavatams. So there's a lot more to be done. That's the point. So I think really what's important for us to gather from this is the spirit of these devotees that were, taking showers in the basement under a hose. I mean, I can remember traveling in a truck, raising funds and things. And we, in winter, some places in winter, we would like go into a 7-Eleven store. We had those 5-gallon buckets. We would put hot water in the bucket, and by the morning it would just be kind of lukewarm, so you could put it outside and stand on the top of the bucket and take a shower, and then jump back in the truck and try to warm up before you froze to death. So, we did things like that were necessary to do. And I got arrested. Your policeman let you go. I got arrested in 3 different towns in 3 different nights in a row, and we called the temple president and said, Swavas Prabhu, it's over. We're done. No more Santa Claus suits. We tried it 3 times. They wasn't appreciated. We saw the connection. Santa Claus is originally St. Nicholas, and he's a representative of Christian faith and tradition and love of God, and that's what we're doing. But for people who thought Santa Claus is about filling the malls with people selling things and making a lot of money and buying things you don't need, what's the connection? You're exploiting it. But anyway, just to make that point, I think it's really, when we hear these stories, it's inspiring, and we should really appreciate the sacrifices of all the devotees that went before us. And we shouldn't think, oh, we missed the opportunity to do big and important things. There's no more work to be done. We just scratched the surface. And, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now, all of you, depend on your age, some of you 10 years from now, some of you 20 or more, Opal maybe 30, 40, 50, should be sitting here telling the next generation about all the exciting things that you did, which are going to be different. Different times and places require different types of efforts and special sacrifices. But it's not like it's all been done. It's just, again, scratching the surface. I'm sure everybody here would say, yeah, we did a little bit, but if people don't take it up and take it to the next level, it's an interesting history, but it's not supposed to be an interesting history. It's a movement. It's something that has to continue on into the future. So hearing these stories, please, again, don't think, oh, I missed it, but think about how can I imbibe this mood in my present situation, in my current ashram, in my situation, in my time, place, and circumstance, to carry on the same type of enthusiasm and dedication and willingness to sacrifice for Prabhupada. And as Maharaj mentioned, it's not like a lot of mistakes weren't made. I mean, there was a lot of mistakes were made, and a lot of things that we shouldn't be repeated. But we should learn from the mistakes of the past, and we should learn from the enthusiasm of the past, and then figure, how do I apply it today? What does this mean to me? Say you mentioned about it. So I feel when we read the Bhagavatam, I always feel it's not so much like, what's this Sanskrit word mean? Who's the father, the son of this? It's like, what does this mean to me? What does this verse mean to me today in my situation? So the same way, what does it mean to all of us? With respect, you can think about that the next day and a half as we're listening to more stories. What does it mean to me? And what can I do to continue to carry this energy, this enthusiasm forward? And with that, I'll end with a little Prabhupada story that's beautiful. And I forget the name of the devotee. It's in New Vrindavan, similar to the guard story. One devotee was asked in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada was there, can you please help guard Prabhupada's quarters? And so he was doing that. He was kind of walking around. But then it started to rain, so he stepped in, kind of inside. There was like an overhanging half garage or some structure like that. And you could hear Prabhupada, because late at night, you could hear Prabhupada translating and dictating, writing for his books. So he was listening, and then he heard Prabhupada had stopped. So he wondered, what had happened. Then he realized Prabhupada was standing right there in the doorway. He was a new devotee. So he paid his obeisances and said, Jai Srila Prabhupada, can I do any service for you? And Prabhupada said, yes, you can go where I cannot go. And the devotee was like a little shocked. And I don't know if he said it or he was just thinking, well, Prabhupada, you've just been in India. I don't even remember the year. But, you've just been in India, then you were in Russia, then you were in Paris, then you were in South America, then you were Africa. He was thinking like this. So Prabhupada said, you can go where I cannot go. So, well, where is that? Prabhupada said, you can go into the future. You can go into the future. And then he said this really beautiful thing. He said, and you will convince the people how much Krishna loves them by how you treat them. Isn't that beautiful? So that's an instruction for all of us.
But interesting, Prabhupada, so you can go into the future.
Yeah. Because he's thinking that my time's limited in this world and my particular mission on this planet. He's continuing up. But us, we carried it on. And all of you can carry it on. We all have to carry into the future, which is really wonderful for us to take in heart. And not just that we take it in the future, but that, as he said, we convince people how much Krishna loves them by the way we treat them. Talking about sometimes we get caught up with project. We're talking today about the temple. The temple's not, it's the deities and it's the building and it's painting the front and all that, but it's people before projects. That's what really makes a difference. So just a thought before we have prasadam.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. It's a good round of applause to everybody. Hare Krishna. Hari Bol, please. I can see, yes, everybody, please. Thank you so much. I can see that there are more people in the prasadam area than here in the temple hall right now at this moment. So that's good mood, by the way. we are getting into the restaurant and we'll have prasadam, lunch prasadam until 2:30. So from now until 2:30, we'll have lunch prasadam. Please make sure you eat nicely. We'll get back here at 2:30 and we'll have lecture by His Holiness Ramapal Swami Maharaj. That will go until 3:30, 1 hour lecture. And then after...
Do you know what Maharaj's lecture, what is the theme?
I think it's going to be on Sisi Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita.
It's something in relation to Lord
Something related to Lord Chaitanya's pastime. That's what, as I remember, yes. And then from 3:30, we are going to prepare for the yagya. 1 hour devotees will be working here and they will be working on preparing for the yagya. Meanwhile, we are going to play few recordings. So we have still 3 or 4 recordings that we have not played. 4:30, the yagya will start. So by that time, everybody please come back here, be part of the yagya. That will go until 5:30. And then for half an hour, from 5:30 to 6, we are going to have drama by our Goloka children's schools. Futures we are talking about. So we'll see some of the performance by our futures. And then 6 o'clock, we are going for Harinam. Every Saturday, we go for Harinam. So when I was requesting devotee, many said that, oh, we are going to have the program in the temple. That is going to be for us. what we are doing for people who are outside on the street, on the map we very clearly said that, what we are doing for the people who are out there, let's go for Harinam. So requesting all of you, if you can, please come for Harinam. We'll live here at 6 o'clock, be at the Chuck Berry statue on Delmar Boulevard is on the Washington University campus. We'll be there for around 2 hours. At 8 o'clock we'll leave. Likely we'll get here by 8:20 or so. We'll have prasadam here by 9 p.m. Then we'll go back home, take rest, and again tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock, we'll start Mahamangala-arti. So that's how the day is going to roll out. But thank you once again. So amazed, and I wrote down those 4 instructions. And we are going to implement, we are going to work on that one by one. For sure, we'll touch base with you offline and try to capture as much as we can and try to have a digital or some sort of printed format of how ISKCON St. Louis came into existence.
Also our new temple.
Plus,
The first project is already in pipeline.
yes,
Maharashtra is already in pipeline.
yes. So we have, no, the first item was basically reaching out to, yes, yes,
That's already in pipeline.
yes. So that's already. Definitely, I saw that you have tons of notes, so we'd like to consult you and get some of those information and start, working with you.
Another suggestion I just had, while Vamanadeva Prabhu is here and he has so many of the letters that Prabhupada wrote him,
Yes,
maybe just for the future St. Louis ISKCON history, some of those letters can be phototyped and eventually post.
so
So devotees, guests in general, they'll just see how some of the history of St. Louis ISKCON developed from
So-
1974.
exactly, Prabhuji. So we have been talking about, we had museum upstairs, Srila Prabhupada Museum, and still if you go upstairs, you will see shoes and,
No, that's
so the museum we are going
that's
to,
Srila Prabhupada's personal paraphernalia.
right.
that
So,
we use.
so some of these items,
But in terms of having something written, like letters that Prabhupada directly wrote to Vamanadeva saying, oh, you're in St. Louis, you've developed a temple there, that's wonderful. That can also
right.
be photocopied just to have, because at some point, we're going to lose all this
Right,
information.
right.
and so many things.
So all of that information can be part of our museum,
Yes.
where devotee in future can come and see how ISKCON St. Louis
Take
is.
advantage.
Yes,
Vamanadeva Prabhu is here, you can consult with them and get some of these letters photocopied and things like that.
yes. Thank you so much. Yes, appreciate that input. Thank you so much once again for coming, and we'll proceed for the prasadam. We'll get back here at 2:30. Hare Krishna. Nitai-Gaura-Nataraj ki jai.
Kindly everyone be back here by 2:30.